patience while we try to figure out these technical difficulties. We had one meeting prior to this where we kind of went over sections 1 through 6, I'm sorry, 12A, 1 through 6. And we had a lot of questions for STE to just kind of build our understanding and background on what these might mean and if anything needs doing in that respect. So section 1, I've set up this document that you guys are looking at currently, I believe, correct? Everyone's got it up? Yes.
Yes.
So that you have access to the links at the top. So you have the Public Act language at the top. You have the legislative summary, which kind of puts it into more bite-sized understandings. And then also the CEPRL report that is specific to this section. So not the bigger CEPRL report. They took that information and they condensed it down for us. And then the last one, we have some of the questions that were asked at our last meeting, and then in yellow, the answers to those. Basically, for number 1, according to CEPRL, as well as some of the questions that we had, there really isn't anything that we necessarily have to do at this time for section 1 because there isn't anything being newly repealed outside of that conversation of initial versus provisional versus professional in there. The questions that we did have were based on that language. There was some question as to whether or not there were EPPs, RESCs, or BOEs that are doing alternative pathways already, because the language kind of alluded to that a little bit. The reality is that no, not currently. So then it becomes a question as to we keep the status quo of we have EPPs that are certified by CAPE. We have programming, we have an assessment, we're looking at alternative routes to that assessment. The master's allows us to focus. It actually gives us some flexibility. In the past, you would kind of take different credits for different things. You could get to like a plus 30, but this master's also allows the candidate or the educator to decide what they want to go down. In the past, the master's had to be in your original content area that you were kind of pursuing, but now you're able to do whatever kind of appeals to you, whether you want to get a master's in math, history, special ed masters, whatever it might be. It allows you flexibility in its current status. The other question that was there was, are there any EPPs, RESCs, or BUEs that are doing alternative pathways for cross endorsement? And this was a slightly different answer. So these are approved programs by SBE and us now. They are non-credit bearing, ACEs, and it's all the abbreviations that you can see in there. And then our universities in Connecticut offer master level coursework specifically aligned to cross endorsements requirements for specific endorsement areas. But in many cases, you can take a praxis without having to do a master's to get cross endorsed currently, with a few exceptions, is my understanding. Some thoughts under that part was just, a master's and offer 30 credits beyond, which was the previous option, or do we keep it at a master's? And are there any other possible options for people to show advanced study alternative routes that don't currently exist? There was also something that ST had said to not fully remove provisional for those who currently hold provisional. So we wouldn't be issuing new provisionals per se under the current legislation, but we wouldn't be getting rid of the provisional for people who hold a provisional until they move into their professional, if that makes sense. And I think the legislation kind of speaks to that already from 2441, correct?
Yes, provisionals will remain. Oh, I don't know if you want me to answer that question. Sorry.
Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So we will be issuing provisionals up until 7/1/25. So for the next 8 years, provisionals will be a part of the language for certification levels in Connecticut. So if you're proposing new legislation and you're only mentioning initial or professional, that may leave out those educators. So for the next 8 years, although we won't be issuing them after 7/1/25, there will still be lots of educators in the state that hold them.
Perfect. That makes sense. So that's something for us to keep in mind in terms of language as we move forward. Then the second part, I've linked in the regulations. Oh, I'm
Can I ask a
sorry.
question,
Go ahead.
Jennifer? Yeah,
Yeah, go
sorry.
ahead.
I realize you may not be able to see hands raised. I just have a question about that.
Looking at two screens, so it's, yeah, I might not be. So
That's all right. I just want to make sure I understand that. So there will still be a lot of folks who have provisional, but SDE will no longer be issuing them. So will those folks get grandfathered in, or it seems odd that we would be approving, or someone would be approving initials that would somehow seem to be like a layer up, while folks, because of just the timing of it, sit at provisional. Am I misunderstanding?
No, it's just that they already hold them. We'll be issuing them, like I said, up until July 1, because up until July 1/25, we still have that criteria in place. If someone wants to advance, or if someone's coming from another state up until 7/1/25, we'll still be issuing those provisional certificates. So we won't be taking certificates from people. People will maintain that certificate until their expiration. If at the time of their expiration of their provisional, if they do not meet requirements to advance to professional, they will be issued an initial certificate at that time after 7/1/25.
Okay, so our focus is just to make sure that we don't have an
Exclude them from
unintended
any
consequence.
language.
Yeah, just
Correct.
trying to leave
Right.
out anybody who already
Yes.
has a provisional and be like,
Correct.
oops, you get nothing, because even though we're not
Right.
newly issuing, there, anybody who was issued one, yesterday they have still a valid certificate for 8 years. And so,
Yeah. It's just as of 7/1/25, any newly issued certificate will reflect our 2-level system, which is initial professional. But we will
And
not be taking away or replacing any current provisional holder certificate with another certificate unless they're eligible to advance to professional.
And is there any advantage to somebody waiting to apply so they don't get a provisional?
Waiting to apply?
Like, what does it mean for someone who
if
is
you are
sitting side by
currently
side?
eligible, like if your certificate is going to run out, if you hold an initial and you're currently eligible for provisional, that's all we can issue you as a provisional. You've met team, you've had the experience. If you haven't, if you have not met the requirement, then you would typically say, oh, I'm gonna renew. You can't apply to renew if you're eligible for renew at the initial if you're eligible for provisional. If you have time, let's say my certificate doesn't expire until September, and I have an initial that's valid through September, I don't have to apply now for the provisional, even if I've already met the requirement. I don't have to. I could wait, and my initial's just going to get longer, and then I'll move straight from initial to professional under the new set of tiers. So you're either going to go initial to professional, or people who went from initial to provisional, those people are then going to go from provisional to professional because they already moved up previously.
Got it. Thank you.
So I think the only thing that we need to think about is if we're writing language to update the regs, because this is legislation, is that we want to ensure that the regs reflect the fact that some folks might still be in provisional, grandfathered in, but won't be reissued. And after 8 years, like they're either going down to an initial or they're moving up to a professional based on where they are. So that we just have to keep that in mind in terms of any language that we are going to be putting forward for the regs, because this is already part of statute. So I don't think we'd have to create new language for the statute. This is more about updating the regs and putting them, making sure that they both align, regs to statute. The second part here is actually section 2 and section 3 are closely tied to each other. So when you're reading section 2, also consider going down to reading section 3. But ultimately, like the quick summary of section 2 is to align the degrees from EPPs and endorsement codes. And the other one is to kind of evaluate the adequacy and relevance of existing endorsement codes. So if we're just looking at that alignment of degree, one of the questions that we had from the group for SDE was how do they code current align? How do the codes currently align? So secondary endorsements So I found this interesting. This was new learning to me from the meeting on Wednesday, is that even though we extended it, 4 to 12, previously it was 7 to 12, but on the back of their certificate, it actually said they could teach 5th to 12. Am I saying that correct? Right? Yes.
As long as they were in a
so-
departmentalized setting, as long as if they could be in 5th grade or 6th grade with the 7 through 12, as long as if their endorsement was English 7 through 12, they were eligible to teach 5th grade or 6th grade English as long as they were just teaching English all day long. That's always been in place.
Yeah. So even though their front of their certificate said 7 through 12, in actuality, they could have taught 5 through 12, and the extension of the endorsement only went down to 4. So technically, we really only extended it by 1 year in there. The question came up along the lines of the middle school endorsement covers 4 through 8, but there's only one university in Connecticut that offers middle school programming. All the other EPPs offer their programming in specific content area for math or English or whatever it is, so that it has that full gap of middle school to high school. So I guess the question then becomes, is there work to be done within this if the current EPPs don't really offer a middle school program? Specific middle school program.
There's more than just one. Albertus Magnus offers
Bridgeport.
undergraduate middle grades, and University of Bridgeport offers middle grades at the graduate level. CREC was recently approved for middle grades math as an alternate route. And the middle grades subject specific. So it's not the old middle grades that allowed you to teach anything, but there's subject specific middle grades programs. So it's not just one EPP.
Rick, have
Okay,
they
thank
actually started it? I know they've got.
They have
approved.
not enrolled yet. Their plan
Yeah,
was
so
to
no one's
enroll
come through.
this
And do
fall.
you know
Correct.
if anyone comes through the Albertus Middle School? That I know.
It's
just-
probably small just because it tends to be a fairly small EPP.
Yeah,
to
UB
begin
is the only
with.
one I ever
Right,
see.
but it does
so.
exist. I mean, they are approved at the undergraduate level for middle grades, English, history, math, and general science for grades 4 through 8. So that's just worth noting.
Okay. So then in terms of the endorsement codes currently aligned, do they align based on information and kind of that extension of 4 through 12? Kaylin is saying,
Yes, they align.
Yes.
Yes, they definitely align. And we don't want to get rid of them either, for a couple of reasons. One being it allows our elementary, our early childhood teachers to expand to middle grades. That's one of the biggest cross endorsements we see for those areas, is to expand up to a content area middle school endorsement. And then we also want to make sure that we have alignment with other states, with other programs and other state certification holders that might hold middle grades somewhere else.
so if our current endorsement though is looking to be 4 through 12 and pre-K through 6, how does that align if we have those additional middle school endorsements?
Well, it allows flexibility and teacher flexibility, and I'm not sure what you mean by alignment. They extended it down to 4th grade, I think, just so it gave districts and teachers more flexibility within their certification area. They're aligned in that they're content-based, just like our secondary ones. So we don't just issue a middle school endorsement like we did previously, although there are probably some teachers in this state that still hold those older endorsements. So we don't want to also get rid of them either for that reason. But they are aligned in that they are content specific. So we have middle grades English, we have middle grades math, all the different science areas as well.
So
If I'm
arguably, like
gonna
Kaylin's saying, if somebody's an elementary teacher who wants to be able to move up, and their math knowledge may not be sufficient enough to be able to be qualified for the math 4 through 12 certification, because the math
yes.
content that
Thank
one
you for
would need
clarifying
for
that.
10th, 11th, and 12th grade is significantly more robust than you might need to only go up to 8th grade. So the middle grades content certification exam is different than the secondary 7 through 12 exam, because the expectation of the content goes only to sort of the 8th grade level as opposed to going all the way till 12th grade. So if you eliminate it, that would just, fewer people would have access to that opportunity if they wanted it.
Exactly.
But we are
I-
currently issuing, right, middle school?
We are, yes.
We issue middle school subject specific. There's no such
Correct.
thing as just generic like middle
Middle
school,
school.
but there's subject specific middle grade certification.
The alignment, as far as I'm understanding, is do our programs. So we've had programs that were 7 to 12 that have always allowed you to teach 5 to 12. And do these same 7 to 12 programs align with the fact that we now are letting them teach in grades 4 to 12? That's how I was interpreting the alignment. So basically, we've added the grade 4 to our secondary. Does the program need to change to accommodate the fact that we're extending down one more grade level in the content area? And for that, I would say, again, it's up to the programs to determine that. But if you have the content, you have the content. I think the only thing that they might want to consider, and I don't know if I'd say it's necessary, is making sure that there's a pedagogical or methodology understanding for working with younger students.
But I would say that conversation probably needs to be part of the larger conversation when you get to the content of all of the regulations that have been
Right.
repealed and all of the program approval regulations that have been repealed. So that's
Exactly.
a lot of thinking that's going to have to take place insofar as what will programs have to contain in this new world where everything's been repealed.
I
And
agree.
could that be a policy statement in the regs where we have a generic statement that there has to be pedagogical coursework applicable to the age group that's taught? Right? Could
I mean,
it
I
just
think
be
that's
an
some of the
overall
thinking that you're
statement?
going to have to do about
Yeah, I
all
mean,
of the regulation. I guess I wouldn't. I would. This I think is part of your very much larger conversation that's going to have to happen relative to the many pieces that have been repealed.
and
Right,
I
'cause-
think you could do that. For example, in current regulations, there are places where it says you must have X number of credits in a particular course of study. And there are other areas where it says you need 3 credits in educational psychology, which may include areas such as. So that's the kind of way you can, if you're doing the language, you could say, well, they need X number of credits in pedagogy, which may include, middle and secondary methods, or, again, that's how you can kind of create a guidance that suggests without absolutely requiring one specific course.
Right. For me, that covers the early childhood concern too. That's in the second
Right.
part of this,
Mhm.
because just adding on
Yeah.
and you'll cover pre-K is not enough. Thank
Yeah,
you.
Right, and that's part of that larger conversation too. Just
Yes. What would make sense from an SDE standpoint, it was what is the current process for determining alignment? Already aligned, but pre-K alignment may be needed, already developing birth to grade 3. You guys are already working on. was
So
it
we had
birth
a
to-
work group that was actually required via statute about 2 years ago, where they wanted us to re-examine our early childhood certifications, because as you can see, we have our 112, which is students with or without disabilities, birth to K, and then we have our 113, which is students with or without disabilities, pre-KK, and then elementaries 1 through 3. It creates, and because they're integrated with special education, it creates a shortage in that teachers are forced to either decide if they want to do birth to K or pre-K to 3, and it definitely leads more people to choose the elementary generalist. So part of the work that we did as a work group, and the General Assembly should have this information, but I can definitely get my hands on some stuff too, if you'd like. I wasn't the lead chair who maintained the document for the General Assembly, but what we did was we researched other states and what they were doing as far as early childhood education, and our goal, and we thought would be to transition to a students with or without disabilities birth to grade 3. the early childhood people say age 8, but we have to use it in terms of grades. So we said birth to grade 3 would be something that would probably help our field considerably. It wouldn't make teachers feel so blocked off with limited choices.
So replacing 112 and 113 with a single endorsement that covers that whole spread.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Correct. That was what we discussed as something that could, and to be more in line with what like New York is doing for example. They have 2 different certs and you can combine them. They have a students with disabilities birth to age grade 2, students without disabilities, and then students with or without. So it would be good to try to, if that's something, you want to move forward with alignment, offer, improve our early childhood offerings for certified teachers. That would be something that you may want to consider.
Okay, would you be able to get that to Chloe?
I will
I think
reach
that would
out
be-
to Paige at University of Hartford because she was chair at the time, and I will see what she has for that report that was sent to the General Assembly.
Because if so much of that has already been done, I mean, that would be a
Exactly,
good
and it
review.
has been. We had guest
Really?
speakers, we
Make
researched other
legislative
states, yeah.
recommendations. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So then the other part of that, does anyone have any questions about that part before we move into 3, which is also related to 2?
I do. I'm curious about what are the shortage areas in the birth to grade 3 realm? Like, is it difficult to find kindergarten teachers? Is it difficult to find pre-K 3, pre-K 4 teachers? Birth to 3, like where does that?
So
I'm
birth
curious
to
of the
3?
need right now. Yeah.
So birth to 3 definitely struggles. We
Okay.
came together with the Office of OEC about, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago now. Well,
Mhm.
maybe 3 years. I can't remember exactly. Sorry, so much happens. But we came together with them and we helped to develop legislation that would allow certified special ed teachers, 165 pre-K 12, 065 K-12, or deaf of hard or hearing, or
Yeah.
blind,
Blind
or
yeah,
so
all
we
the
allow
specialized.
them with
Uh-huh.
that certificate to
Mhm.
apply for a waiver. So a birth to 3 facility, agency, or program rather, can hire one of those teachers, and we do a waiver process with the commissioner's approval, and that has helped them to staff their birth to 3 programming. But they definitely struggle. Yes,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else have questions on that? Is someone putting, I feel like the chat keeps popping up and I'm not sure.
I just popped in the chat and it was piggybacking on the
Oh, perfect.
interventionist component. So just in the merger, wanting to make sure that I heard it correctly. Because if we're losing the birth to preschool part, I think I just missed some of the language. I want to make sure that the interventionists still end up with the birth upward
Yes,
component.
that was the goal of our committee, was to have 1 early childhood certification versus 2 that were very grade specific, and to have it be birth to grade 3, age 8 in
perfect.
early childhood terms, but to transition to 1, and within that have offerings of a combination of students with or without, or either or.
Great. So it's birth to
Grade 3,
grade 3.
yes, which would align with what New
Yeah.
York does.
It would take the 2 existing ones and make it one, covering that whole span.
Perfect. I think some people have been talking about it as pre-K to 3 still. And so I just want to make sure we were on the birth part. Thank you.
And
And if we get that, we can share that with the group for discussion. I'm sorry, Jen, go ahead.
oh, that's okay. For 1st to 6th grade, do I recall that they can go down to kinder now? Am I misremembering?
Not
There's a
currently,
separate authorization they can request.
Ah, okay.
But
Okay.
but as of
the actual
7-1,
certificate is just 1 to 6.
It is. Okay.
But effective this July 1, then that's when it changes.
Yeah.
effective July
Yes,
1,
this July
25,
1
pre-K and K
changes
will be
pre-K.
added.
So anyone who has a 1 through 6
Can now teach down to pre-K after July 1 of
can
this year.
teach down to pre-K. Okay. That's what I
For
that's
general
what I think I was
education,
trying to
not special
remember.
education.
Yeah, general ed. Yeah, thank you.
All right. So then the next part is the endorsement codes. And if you click on the link that's in that PDF, it'll take you to all the endorsement codes. And if you scroll down towards the bottom, it talks about the ones that are currently like not issued newly, but reissued for anyone who holds them. And I actually had a question for SDE. Is there a way of getting the data on who holds those non-newly issued
The
endorsement
obsolete
codes?
ones. We could
Obsolete
probably run
endorsements? Mhm.
reports and see
We
how
could run a
many
report.
people hold them.
We can ask Reddy
If
to
you
run a
could-
report.
Who?
Our tech guy who helps us
Oh,
with this
right.
piece. Yes, I can ask Reddy to run a report for certification holders of all obsolete endorsements.
Yeah, so at the bottom of that web page, the Bureau of Certification, you will see certification endorsement codes no longer issued. So if we could get a handle on like who are we talking about population-wise in terms of who we might be affecting. If we have a small amount of people where movement can happen, then maybe it's something that we need to look at and adjust and put them into a new endorsement once they have to renew. But if we're looking at like a larger percentage, then maybe we can have a conversation around more flexibility in allowing them to renew. The biggest concern, honestly, within that is we have, our districts are currently, where did they go? There it is. Our districts are currently looking for specific endorsement codes, and people who own or hold these other obsolete ones or no longer issued ones feel like they can't apply for those positions because the codes aren't there. So we're just talking about kind of streamlining it for the profession potentially. So if we could get that data in terms of how many people are within each one of those codes, I think that would kind of be helpful in helping us manage expectations in how we want to approach that, if that makes sense. But there are some in there that, they're just not issued anymore outside of renewals is what it sounds like. Section 4, STE stated that Laura Tefrate, am I saying that correctly?
Lauren, here in the meeting.
Lauren, sorry.
That's okay.
Okay.
That we had some questions around that, but we needed you, but you weren't able to come at the time you were at another meeting. So this might be a more active conversation within the idea of that for number 4 was implementation of EPP standards and development for CAPE. Now, CAPE handles some, but does not NIASC handle like the pre-K early childhood certification of EPP programs, or no?
No, well, yes and no, but I think wait, there's a weird echo.
We're
Can you
hearing
hear
you
me?
fine. I'm hearing you fine.
Okay, cool. I think the piece of this that you want to pay most attention to is the repeal of the sections. So 10145D9 and 10145D10 of the regulations that have been repealed have every single thing to do with how educator preparation operates in the state of Connecticut. So I know in CPRL's document, it sort of synthesized it to say like kind of clean this up to include CAPE. But I think that the ad hoc committee and or the board as a whole will have to take the time to actually read through all of the pieces of that have been repealed, because that has to do with every single aspect of educator preparation, not having to do with the certification regulations that like have the course specificity, but how programs get new approval and continuing approval. So to answer your question, CAPE is an accrediting body that the state entered into a relationship with in 2016 as a result of that other legislation. And CAPE accredits programs as a whole, right? And so like we had the CAPE guy come, and they have standards. So what I'm thinking might this language be, it says the implementation of the standards for educator preparation programs developed by the CAPE, by the council. And so they have their initial preparation standards, and then they also have their advanced program standards. And, I could share documents with you so that you could be familiar with those. But I think what's important to note is the repeal of 10.145 D9 and 10, and it's the majority of that, is all of the procedures. It's literally how every aspect of the process works. And so I think some of the thinking that this group will need to do is you can replace parts of that with CAPE, but you can't replace it in totality with CAPE because it speaks to, for example, like admission criteria into programs. All of that's been repealed. It speaks to, just many things. So like if you look at it, there's old language. The prior accrediting body was something called NCATE, the National Council of Accreditation of Teacher Education. And so a lot of what was repealed refers to NCATE. And so some of the thinking that you all are going to have to do is, are you just replacing NCATE with CAPE? Are you creating new standards? But it's almost everything. So it's sort of a harder question. I'm happy to answer any of your questions, but it's sort of deep, if that makes sense. Like it's a lot of parts.
No, and I'm a firm believer in us looking back at what is being repealed to see if there are things that we want to keep or build off of or just replace entirely with different language. I did link the regulation in the PDF there in that third column, as well as the Special Act 1622. So that way the committee can review that as well.
And what's tricky, I think I would say, is you have to look at the new Special Act, because it's not all of 9 and 10, but it's almost all of 9 and 10. Like I went through and I sort of like highlighted and read all of the pieces. So like in the body, at the bottom of the bill that formed you guys, Public Act, whatever it was, is a large clump of numbers. And so you have to really almost like line by line go through what was repealed and what stays. Does that make sense? Because it's not everything, but I would say it's about 97% of it. And it might be places where it's like a cleanup and you're replacing NCATE language with CAPE. But then there's also specific Connecticut specificity around, and this is some of the thinking, like, do you want to stipulate admission requirements into programs? Most states do. Are we like things like of that nature? And I think operationally, I understand the repeal is because some of this language is not how it actually is, because it refers to things that don't exist anymore. So I think it does almost have to be like a line by line thinking for what you all want to keep and change, but everything is sunset as of, July 1. But so in answer to your question, CAPE is the accrediting body. It went into effect in Connecticut in 2016. And some of our EPPs are going through it for the first time because they were given like essentially a grace period, because it took from when that legislation went into effect. Like some EPPs, for example, like OHE ARC went through for the first time 2 years ago. Correct, because it's a new program, has their first CAPE visit this fall. So there's a cycle, if you will.
No, that makes sense. Okay. So this sounds like it's going to be I was going to say, this sounds like a kind of a bigger chunk. And I think it's going to lend to us having a conversation of who might help us with regulations and, sorry, I'm having a moment, regulations and legislative language. So I think that's going to lead into that shortly. Does anyone have any questions, though, off the bat that we could kind of hold on to, or suggestions that we want to think about? Because this is going to definitely be like one entire meeting is just going to be specific to this part.
Yeah, something that comes to mind is, or something I think we have to consider is if there's an EPP that doesn't have to go through CAPE. Like, because in the legislation, it says like boards of ed could also have a EPP. So that's
So that's an interesting
I worry
question.
about. Yeah.
So I think the legislation said for us to review, and I think that was one of the first ones on here, as to whether or not we want criteria for assessing boards of ed, regional education services, and entities' proposals for alternative pathways for educators. We can make the decision as to whether or not we even want that to be a thing, because it is currently not a thing, right?
Well,
The
it
rest
became a thing.
do,
It's a
because
thing a
Crack
little
and
bit.
ACEs,
Yeah.
yeah.
But it is, Jen, to your point, well, I guess both Jens, to, I think, so both Jens, that is some work, I think, and thinking that the board has to do, because
Yeah,
in the previous language that was repealed, there were criteria, and I'll just, to be eligible to apply to the commissioner to operate an educator preparation program, the institution shall meet the following requirements. And it was that they had to be accredited by NETCHI, which is, the regional accrediting body of institutes of higher education, and approved by the Office of Higher Education. And then the OHE has operated the alternate route to certification. And then I believe in like 2006, ACES got approved to offer alternate route programs for TESOL and school library media. CREC got approved initially to offer a cross endorsement for special education, but then in 2019 was when they got approved for initial certification. I wasn't here then, so I don't know how that necessarily came to be. But so some of that thinking is what criteria does the board want to have around institutions, right? And I would also say from a Connecticut approval process, what criteria do you want to have to say that this is a Connecticut entity? Because in the teacher preparation world, there are a lot of sort of online corporations operating nationally, in terms of teacher preparation. And so you might want to think about, when you're thinking about criteria, adding that component to your thinking as well. How do you, what determines who is even eligible to apply to become an ed prep program, if that makes sense.
right. And that's
Also-
why I was thinking, like, ever since I've seen this, I'm concerned about boards of ed running an EPP, because having come from pre-K 12 in various, roles, and most recently administrative role in a school, I think, and now doing this work, I think that would be very challenging for a board of ed to try to run an EPP, and CAPE wouldn't accredit them anyway. I don't think. So
We'd have to find, if we were going to
Okay.
go that direction as a state, we'd have to find out from them. I did a quick check nationally. There aren't any, but I don't know that
Right.
that means
that there
that they
couldn't be, right?
couldn't. It
Yeah.
would be a question that the board would have to engage with CAPE about, I think.
Mm-hmm.
If-
Mm-hmm.
I
Also,
agree.
you
I
looked like
think
you wanted to
that's,
say something.
Me?
Oh, I thought you, yeah.
No, sorry.
Oh, Margaret, I
No.
didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry.
Margaret?
It's hard with this.
Yeah.
no, that's okay. I just wanted to agree with Jen Delaney, because I think that we have to be very careful about doors we open and doors we close, right? We have to make sure that there's comparability of criteria regardless of the EPP. And if we open up something that inadvertently diverts from the fidelity of the other programs, we have a much larger problem. I think we also always have to think about operational simplicity
Mhm.
and not making new things that have a fiscal note attached to them. Obviously, we're in a hiring freeze right now for state agencies. The budget is getting smaller, not bigger.
Mhm.
So we always have to think about operational simplicity and not creating new things. We have partnership agreements in place that, look at what's happening in other states that we can, build on, recognizing the work that's happening in those states. But making new things, I think, opens up a very big can of worms. And Jen,
Yeah.
totally agree with like that conflict of interest and whose
Yes.
swim lane is which swim lane
Mhm.
kind of conversation. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, and to jump on your comment as well, like, not only not just creating new things just to create them, but also not removing one barrier to put another barrier in place, right? So that's the other thing that is very important for us to remember.
Yes. Are there any other questions about that And I'll be reviewing this video again afterwards so that I have all the notes for something that we're going to be doing in a moment. I just want to make sure we get through all the questions that were posed by the committee and the answers, and allow anybody to have any follow-up questions to that. Let me see. What is the program length? Oh, so we're on. Does anyone have any more questions about 4 specifically to CAPE at this time? Okay. And then 5 has to do with the necessity of temporary 90-day certificates. And the legislation for this deadline says the necessity of a temporary 90-day certificate issued under 10-145B of the general statutes as amended by this act. There's the question of, is there a need for the 90-day certificate, and what is its purpose? And SDA provided us with some information on that. So this is the only ARC. Is this only for ARC graduates? Yes, it's true for Charter Oak State College and Office of Higher Ed. And then what is the purpose? Currently approved ARC programs in the state were approved with the temporary 90-day certification as part of their programs. If the ARC were to change their program requirements to not include the temporary 90-day cert, they will need to seek approval from SBE and EdPrep Cert Board. The ARC program in the state does not provide a long enough student teaching experience, which is why they needed the 90-day, correct?
Mm-hmm.
My understanding. Okay.
Yes.
So what is the program's length of the students currently? So we got some answers on that. And then what is the length of the student teaching for the EPP graduate? And is it comparable to the EPP programs? And do we even still need it? So not that we don't need the student teaching, but the length of time and the 90-day cert, just to be clear. Programs are required to offer a 10-week student teaching placement. However, most Connecticut programs include 12 to 16-week student teaching placements. And the ARC program is less than that, correct?
Yes, it's 40 days, 40 consecutive days, which we do it in the spring because they need to learn first in the fall and winter, and in the spring they late winter, early spring, finish up in early spring. And so we put out about between 80 and 100 teachers every year, and about half of them, usually more than 50% by the winter, we have people also in a DSAP at the same time that they're doing this. And the other half are usually still working in whatever their current role is in their profession. Like we have a lot of career changers. And so this is a huge part of people's applicants' decisions whether or not to do this program, because you have to leave your job for those 8 to 9 weeks, because usually like April vacation is in there, so it ends up being 9 weeks or so. And so that does keep some people that we accept from, taking the acceptance, because they talked to their work and they couldn't work out being able to still pay their mortgage or, things like that while they're in the student teaching. And then we really encourage people to look for a DSAP if they're ready to leave their current job, which is, a lot of school districts call us and work with us to find people to fill those empty positions. So between the months of September and October, we actually have a lot of people join into a school system with a DSAP, because once they realize that they can do it with our support, they start to want to try it. So there's that piece. Then thinking ahead this spring, as part of my CAPE preparation, the work I was doing for CAPE preparation, because we had another visit just in January. One of the things I did is we collected some data, and then we had an advisory board with several stakeholders across the state, and graduates from our program and people in our student teaching field and in our current roles as faculty. And I proposed the idea of going 10 weeks. And the data told us that would not be a good plan for us, because it really would add that stress load to the format. And the whole point of our program is that you could still be working and figure out a way to fit this in and not have to go do student teaching for 12 weeks, or, and so I really worry about that. And then the other thing is, I really do think, even if we went to 10 weeks, it's still very short. And they need that extra eye, they need that extra attention from their school administrators when they get into the classroom. And it's something that is a big motivator for us when we're talking to our, when we're guiding our teacher candidates, and helping them understand that, yes, this may have happened really quickly, but we're very rigorous. We meet the same CAPE expectations as any other EPP. But you also have that extra support of when you go into the school, those first 90 days, you have a lot of support, because at the end of that, someone on the administrative team has to sign the paperwork that says, yes, this person is ready for an initial, like, we've observed them, they're good to go. So it's really a nice stepping stone. I don't
Like a
know.
residency almost.
I would say almost more for the people who are in a DSAP, yes, but it is traditional where you have your cooperating teacher. For the people who are traditional, they're not in a DSAP, they are with a cooperating teacher, and they are getting that piece that I think you're talking about with that person for those 40 consecutive days. And a lot of them get a job after too in that district, which is very helpful, of course. So there's that. And then you said it was which was the other school that uses it?
Charter Oaks
Charter
College for their 112.
Yeah,
They have a very small alternate route program.
Yeah, I'm curious to know what their director would say about that. But as far as for me, I really think that that's important. And then, I've actually thought of an idea of maybe being able to potentially expand the 90-day certificate, not remove it. Because if we think of, when we're thinking of ideas, like I said before, where instead of removing a barrier just to put a new one in, like when we're talking about the praxis assessment and people who fall within that one standard error of measure, people who take the assessment and maybe this time they were 5 points short of passing, but we know statistically that if they took that test 3 or 4 times, maybe the person who passed it by 5 points would fail by 1 point next time, right? So we know that there's that range of passing right there. So what if instead of doing like a bridge or a portfolio or something, the people who fell within that one standard error and didn't pass by like the skin of their teeth, right? Maybe those people that we know if they sat a few more times would eventually pass, maybe they get a 90-day cert, and that's how they can get access to the fields. Because once you start working and you've shown in your student teaching that you have control of the content, that's measured in every EPP program when you're student teaching, and you are within one standard error of measure to pass the praxis, we need to get you in a classroom and start working with the curriculum. And maybe we can actually expand the 90-day certification to solve that issue. It's one idea I've thought of since we've last met. So I certainly would not want to get rid of it, because I think we just put so many people, almost 80 to 100 people every year, at least just in my program, and then the other program where people do need that extra little bit of support when they first start working.
So Jen,
So
I just want to make sure
that's
that I
me.
understand.
Yes.
So you're saying that in terms of your background and, arc within your field and what you're doing,
Yeah.
that your recommendation is to keep the 90-day cert, correct? I want to make sure.
Correct. Yes.
As is, and then your recommendation or your idea had to do with a different ad hoc committee, right? You're talking about.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand that there. And I think that there's already a DSAP in place to give temporary certification for up to a year, correct? In shortage areas?
Yeah. So DSAP, and I'm not a certification officer. My colleague Rachel is, but she does all the paperwork, but anyone on this team could help me with specifications. But what we do is if they have a bachelor's degree and they can show that they've passed the praxis, which everyone that comes into our program has to pass ahead of time, it's an entrance requirement. And then you get enrolled into a teacher prep program that's preparing you for that certification that you would need. We enter into agreement with their school district, that we say we're going to prepare them. Yes, we'll sign this paperwork, and then they have to work with the state to get them to be able to hire them into that role. And I believe they have to prove that they've already tried to find someone who's already certified to fill that position. And then
Right.
that's why a lot of districts contact us and really rely on us to fill high need, hard to find positions that we certify for, which is separate
So-
from the 90-day cert, that they're two different things.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I just wanted to make sure that for what we're talking about here, though, the 90-day cert, your recommendation is to keep the 90-day cert
Yes.
for the programs as is. So
For
maybe
our
we relook
graduates.
at section 10-145-4. I'm sorry, there's students like leaving at the end of the day, so there's all sorts of
I
background
missed
noise.
that sound,
apologies.
actually. I missed that sound. Go ahead.
So 10-145-414 and 145D to 427M through N addresses the temporary cert and thus implicates subsection A5. It is important to note, however, that those regulations were repealed because the requirements for educators to obtain temporary 90-day cert are covered under section 10-145BC. So I think we would probably have to look at both of those
Yeah.
and make sure that the one that is being repealed, I'm sorry, it's our social worker saying goodbye to all of our students as they leave, and she's right across the hall. So I think what we would have to do is take a look at section 10-145BC of the statute that they're saying would cover that, and just make sure that there's nothing missing from what is being repealed in 145-414. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So I think we would probably definitely, yes, we would want to keep it based on, the things that we're hearing here. And I would think that I would even cater a motion to say that we want to keep the 90-day cert and look at what is being repealed to ensure that what 145BC of the statutes has everything that it needs to have in it, and addresses anything that might be getting repealed that we want to keep in that repeal.
Can I
If you want a
mention one-
motion, I move that, but I don't want to have to repeat everything you just said.
No, it's okay. The good thing about these video calls is that we can always look back at the transcripts after the fact. So I would say that the motion then is that we want to keep the 90-day cert, but we want to ensure that section 10-145BC of the statutes that covers it reflects anything that we want to keep from what's being repealed. Does that make
So
sense?
moved.
Okay, so moved. Thank you. Do I have a second?
I second.
Second. Okay. All in favor of that, raise your hand for an aye. All right, so it looks like we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me go to the next page. I can't tell if Jenny is raising her hand or not, or if Shannon is. If they're able to drop a message in the chat, that'd be great.
Do you want us to
Shannon
every
put a
hand
message
teacher?
in. Shannon had to
Oh, there's a
leave.
lot of people.
They both
Shannon
left.
Okay, Shannon had
So, yeah.
really, because it's still showing up on my screen as them being in the call. That's
Oh.
funny.
They both left.
Sorry.
You want us to use the
Okay,
raised
so-
hand so it's also recorded, Jennifer?
Yeah,
Raise
that'd be
hand
great. Thank
teacher?
you.
Yeah, that way you just have
Yeah.
it recorded. Okay.
So, yep. I'll raise my hand for that too. Elsa. All right, so we have currently 5 people, Elsa, myself, Margaret, Patrice, and Jen, who want that to continue. And then we will just have to look at the old versus the new on that. Go ahead and unselect. It is so moved then, with the intent of just aligning what is being repealed with what the statute is already covering. All right. And
Can I
then,
mention one point, and you may already know this, but the temporary 90-day, the idea at this point is for our existing ARCs, they, obviously it makes sense for them to continue using the 90-day. The new statute is now saying that new ARC alternate route programs will lead straight to initial. And so any future alternate route programs that are established, whatever the program approval, whatever that requirement is, at that point, those people are going to go straight to initial, and you'll have to keep that, obviously you'll have to keep in mind meeting requirements. So that's, if you're going to have new alternate routes that in the
Mhm.
future, there won't need a 90-day. The 90-day that we are keeping is pertaining specifically to the ones that were approved at the time when, like, they had to meet the 90-day requirement. They had to meet an alternate route requirement as opposed to a regular requirement, if you know what I mean.
So does anyone know if that's something that we can change? Because something I fear in that is, as we continue to shift and meet the needs of the state and the world is changing, and we may, the more routes to education, to becoming a teacher, the better. Maybe something else will pop up, something innovative will pop up where the 10 weeks doesn't make sense for an alternate route in the same situation where we are, where it's mostly career changers, or, and that really can limit making a program be accelerated.
That's probably something the board's going to have to consider, because you're going to have to decide, do we want to have an accelerated one that therefore it moves quickly up front, but then has that 90-day? So we want to keep 90-day continually moving forward, or do we want to change all the requirements so all the programs can be all quick or more traditional and still go straight to initial? That's something I imagine the board's going to have to consider.
And I think it's part of that larger thinking of, what are the standards that you're going to require of ed prep, whether
Right.
it's a traditional university credit bearing program or a non-credit bearing alternate route program, and the parameters around that. Because if they're both going to lead to the initial and you have two totally different sets of requirements, it's going to be interesting to think about the implications of that.
Yeah, because that would mean that us and Charter Oak are the only programs that are able to do less than a 10-week student teaching, because you have to do 10 weeks to get initial and a.
Right. So either you'd have to drop 10 weeks for everybody, or you'd have to, again, are you going to keep it separated out? Because to say this program needs 2 weeks of I'm just pulling random numbers, 2 weeks of student teaching, and this person needs 16 weeks of student teaching, and they both end up getting the same certificate indicating that they're equally prepared. Is that what you want?
Well, a 90-day and initial shows, the 90 days shows that they do still need some support in those first 90 school days. Right. So they're not prepared to necessarily with the student teaching piece to the same level of initial, which is why we have it. But if we say that every new ARC program that any new accelerated program that comes to fruition in the future has to do 10 weeks, that can be very limiting to if depending on who you're trying to bring into that program, especially if you're trying to bring people who are full-time work.
Accurate.
And I would just add one piece, in terms of accreditation standards. Standard 2 of CAPE is all around clinical partnerships and practice, and the importance of clinical practice and educator preparation. So, part of all of your thinking is correct. Like, so if traditional, and if we think about traditional as just, okay, undergraduate or graduate credit bearing, and then we also want non-credit bearing alternative pathways, and they're both going to lead to the same certification. Different, like what Jen's describing in the alternate route, is it was intended to say, okay, these 90 days, you need more support because you did an accelerated pathway. So if you're thinking about the work of the board of creating ed prep standards, and there's that other language that says, no matter what pathway you take, you all end at the initial, then codifying what those standards are for everybody is going to be really important for parity, so that we have comparably prepared educators for all of Connecticut's kids.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that clinical partnership and practice piece, is an accreditation body standard of, a series of graduated clinical experiences and how that manifests. So
Right. That's, I
it's
think,
sort
Lauren,
of complicated work.
yeah, but that's why it's so important to consider the CAPE, because even though we have the shortest student teaching in the state, right, we still have to meet those same CAPE requirements. So I would never see us be able to meet standard 2, which is the clinical practice standard, unless we had the 40 days. I certainly don't think we could ever shorten it, and be able to get them prepared at the right competency levels we need them to be prepared, just like any other program in the state that needs to meet standard 2 CAPE requirements. So it is regulated in that way, as long as we're following standard 2. But yeah, like leaving work for 8 weeks to go do student teaching versus, well, really 9 weeks, because you usually have some days off from school in there, versus 11 or 12 weeks does make a big difference when people are trying to family plan and pay for mortgages, but they do want to become a teacher. So,
And I think our motion was that it is being repealed and that we're looking at what is currently being covered under section 10145BC, and just making sure that it's being repealed, that we're not missing anything from that. I don't think that we're actually saying that we're keeping it for ARC necessarily. I think what we're saying is that we want to make sure that we think that there should be one out there for whatever its purpose is, but that we want to make sure that whatever is being repealed, that there isn't something missing within section 10-145B.
yes.
So
Right. That
that's
was the
more
motion.
where the line.
Yes.
Right.
But then, excuse me, then Julianne just said for us to consider later, the bigger scheme is a new regulation that any new ARC would lead to an initial. So they wouldn't be able to get the 90-day, and we'd have to look at that next.
Right. And I
Yeah.
think one of the things that like we have to kind of like come to terms with is there are things that we are specifically going to have to do to meet these deadlines,
Right. That's
with
true.
kind of
Yep.
our next steps after that, right? Like we meet these deadlines in the way that they're written out, but we also have like our list of ideas on future things that we can add to that or address, right? So I don't want us to feel like so overwhelmed with like we've got I think someone might have said that we've got 5 years of work that we have to do by
I know, it's so true.
by July of
know.
2025 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So, keeping in mind that our focus right now is to meeting the deadlines here with recommendations of the work that we want to move after the deadline as well.
Yeah.
Right.
We just
So
have
those
to,
might be some of the ideas that we have in there through the work that we do.
yeah. I agree. We need that focus. I think when I skimmed it, like it's only for ARC, right? Our ARC program. So maybe there's some kind
I
of
think
wording we might want to change.
Yeah, I think the 10-145BC
Right.
in the statute is a little bit more general.
Okay. We'll have to look at it more deeply. Yeah. All right.
And it's all linked in there as well. But again, like I'm going to be taking this information for something that we're going to do towards the end of this meeting as well. And then numbers, is there any other questions about that 90-day that we want to address, or any ideas that we have that we want to kind of have out there for us to consider in the work moving forward? We good? Okay. Then 6 is more of an Ajit question, because it's really talking about EdSite, which already exists. So when you're looking at that design, develop of statewide data dashboard to enable longitudinal monitoring of workforce data, that's already there. It's more looking at, is what is there hitting all the statutory things that it was intended to hit? So that's going to be more of an Ajit question, where I think I'm going to kind of send him an email with this 1 through 7 that's listed on here, and just ask him, like, is there anything missing from EdSite, and then how do we remedy that?
Yeah.
What would be the better option? I see
I just
Caleb
wanna
has her
add-
hand up.
Sorry. I just want to add that some, there are some stuff that is not on Ed's site that we can internally run reports for. So if there's anything that you meet with a G that he says, no, that's not included in Ed's site, I would even probe a little further, because we do have internal numbers for different things that we don't publish out. That's not on the main. I mean, for the most part, it's very transparent. I'm not saying, but as far as like, certified educate certain areas, like we can even dive deeper, excuse me, and to run into more deep reports. And so when you're talking to a G, like if he's saying it's not there, but you're still looking for it, just ask if there's a method to run this particular report to address this area.
Am I remembering correctly, EPPs have access to expanded information that maybe isn't
Correct.
like public? Okay.
They have a
Yes.
secure
Within that
site.
site. Yeah.
They have a
Okay.
secure site, yes, absolutely. And then they do different levels of reporting that they might be able to share with upon request as well. I mean, I'll
And
defer to
that's
Lauren
on
for
the
that,
Ed
but yeah, that
Yeah.
wouldn't be found on Ed's site. Yep.
All right, perfect. So
Can I
the
just
next
add in-
part of it, sorry, go ahead.
Jen,
Yep.
just one more comment real quick. If there's anything that the SDE staff are thinking, hey, this should be in Ed site or some other place, if this is an opportunity for us to say as a board, this system needs to be further developed and here are the things that need to be in place, or that there needs to be additional training for districts or whatever it is, I would hope that they would, reach out and use their voices so that we can represent them as well.
Yes.
May I share
Um,
something before we conclude on this topic?
Yes. We're not, okay, yes. I was gonna say
Yes.
we're not concluding yet, but go ahead.
Okay, yeah, on this topic. So when you look at number 6, the first thing, like within that third column, number 1, data relating to the EPP, so my graduates students, right? So we're looking at how they're performing in the classroom. Number 2, we're looking at, so number 1 is how the students are performing in our graduates' classrooms. Number 2 is how the teacher is performing. Number 3 is the retention rates, survey results of the employers and their satisfaction with our graduates. So all of these things, almost all of these things, fall into standard 4 of the CAPE requirements. So we have to do that for CAPE. We have to keep track of our graduates within the first 3 years. After they graduate, they're called completers. They have to have graduated within your program in the last 3 years. They have to be working in a Connecticut school, and they have to be working in the certification area for which you prepared them for. So first of all, keeping track of all your graduates once they've left and what certification they're in and where they're teaching. And it gets, we have a lot of strategies that we use to market to them and stay in touch with them. But then it's a lot of this stuff is private information, right? So how are we finding out how they're performing in the classroom, and how are we gaining access to their administrators, and making sure that confidentiality is maintained, and et cetera. Like when we do get student assessment data from graduates who want to interact with us in this manner, making sure that everything is completely redacted. We're not violating any FERPA regulations. Like it gets very tricky. And so I don't quite know what I want to say here other than the fact that we're really looking at what is required for standard 4 of the CAPE standards. And I think I don't know how feasible or realistic some of this is to, or maybe I think maybe that's not the right thing. So we have to get that data anyway, right? It's more how realistic it would be for the people who want to, or the legislative body that wants to hear about how these things are going. Maybe there's some kind of way that could be more privately shared, or for them to understand like what it takes to get this information. And now if it's already hard to get this information from graduates and get them to give us this stuff, and now on top of it, it's going to be publicly. So it makes another layer of, ooh, maybe I don't want to do that. It's already hard to get candidates to or graduates to agree to this kind of stuff. So I could be misinterpreting
Right.
something, but it seems like that's what they're looking for, which I'm happy to provide in reports. But I think it would make it harder for us to get graduates to interact with us in this way.
I think
So
your
Jen,
idea
I
of
think we already have the data. I just don't think, I think there's a note on here that it's more generalized data and not specific to individual people. So that data is already there. And I don't think that it's public facing. I think that goes back to like who has access. I think it's, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lauren, but I think it's like EPPs have certain access to certain things. The state has certain access to certain things. Students might have access to certain things. But it's a matter of, is the website set up for that work? Right, to
I
report
think your
that
original
information.
idea of having a G attend a meeting, because I think some of the statutory language for some of the things that were expected to be reported on the dashboard are not there because it was not at all feasible to do so. So I think
That's what
your
I'm trying
original
to
question
say.
of
Yeah.
including him, because what's on the dashboard, so there's the public dashboard and then there's the EdSite Secure dashboard, but it's still the same measures. They don't have access to different measures. They just have more granular detail. Like they might be able to see, oh, Lauren Tafredi is working in West Hartford Public School at Morley Elementary. They could see candidate level individual data, and they can see first time pass rates, whereas the public only sees best pass rates. But some of those other buckets, if you will, that were part of that legislation, I think at some point, it was like prior to my arrival, were deemed not at all feasible to do so. But I think he would be the best person to be able to speak to all of that complexity. So I think
Right.
that's
Because
a
like, how
smart
are
way
you?
to go.
Yeah, because like, how are you going to see how each PPP's graduates
Yeah.
perform in the classroom without getting some
Yeah.
data on their evaluations? Like,
Yeah.
and
think-
that's
I just want to say though, like with our FOIA laws,
Right.
it is whatever is in the public's best interest. So if someone were to make a public FOI request and it's in their best
Mhm.
interest to know where that teacher's been, how successful were
Mhm.
they can even ask for grades on a transcript without and that's true. If it's
Yeah, yeah.
deemed in the public's best interest, it just matters how deep you want to go like that and the message that comes along with it, right? And of course, with FOIA, like there are some things we don't release, like their home address, their phone number, their
Mhm.
social security number. But as far as anything that's in the CECS or that would be recorded on any type of application form, experience form, college recommendation, it's all FOIA-able.
So would it be
yeah.
appropriate to request a report based on this part of the language from Ajit's department on, how it's being addressed by EdSite, what's public, what isn't, and
Correct.
what was deemed not feasible and why
Right.
for the
And
committee?
And if we can't get to these areas, is there possible other reports that we can run to get us the data that we're looking for that that might still be confidential, but like it wasn't feasible for the website? Because we
So would that
definitely.
be a motion by this committee to request a report from that department on this part of the legislation with the questions that we have? Because then we can, if we find that the report satisfies our requirements, then 6 would be satisfied as part of our deadline, right? If we had a formal report from Ajit's office is what I'm trying to get at.
Maybe. I think kind of my question here is what would be acceptable that the legislative body would want to see, right? So when we look at, for example, number 4, survey, first of all, creating a survey that would have parity across all EPPs, because right now we all have our own surveys and we have a whole set of criteria in standard 5 of the CAPE standards that every survey you create has to go through a very lengthy process to be a reliable survey. So maybe we could get together and do that as a state with all of our EPPs. That would be great. But yeah, so we do this because we have to meet those standards and because it's best practice. And so we do it. So I have my survey results from all of the administrators who chose to fill out the survey in their very busy days. And we also have our survey results from our candidates as well.
Right.
So what would that look like? Like, what would they accept? Would they accept each individual EPP's data, or they
So
want
Jen-
us all to have the same?
I think that's a question that I can't answer and that we can't answer as a committee. And I think it's a good question, but I think that's where we have Ajit's office look at this legislation, that 1 through 7, and provide us a report on how that is being handled. Elsa, I understand. Thank you. At 4, thank you. Okay. So I think the motion would be to have Ajit provide us with a report on 1 through 7 of this part of the legislation. And then we can review that report and decide, is that our next step? Do we get EPPs together to do one survey, or how do we do that? But I think we would need the report first from them, so that we can review that report and make decisions based off of that report. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So can I get a motion to request a report from Ajit addressing the legislation 1 through 7 for EdSite, on things like where does it currently stand, confidentiality, feasibility, that sort of stuff to date?
I make that motion with those words.
Thank you. Can I get a second? All right, we
Elsa's
got
got
Elsa with a second. All right, all in favor, click the raise your hand button for our recording purposes. All right, perfect. It looks like 5 folks say yes. Any abstentions? And any against? All right, looks like it passed with no issue. So we got through the questions that we had asked from the last meeting through SDE. SDE was able to provide us with some information, and we even have some verbal kind of like conversations around ideas on here that Chloe has been taking notes on. So the other part on the agenda is to kind of start moving some work forward and working with people who actually handle legislative or regulatory language. I would need a motion for either having someone at SDE assist us with legislative or regulatory language that we can review and decide if we like or don't like, obviously, or having an organization like CPRL do that work with us. So that's, can we have any discussion around that on our thoughts? Because I'd really love for us to start getting some stuff together.
My question would be the capacity of SDE staff to handle this during these very difficult weeks of the legislative session. I'm not sure it would be realistic, but if they said they could, that'd be wonderful.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you.
One of
Anyone
the
else?
roles of the administrator will be to do that work.
Yeah.
Could
So
I ask whether the hiring freeze has impacted the ability to, our last report was that you had 2 finalists and that sounded great, but 2 days later, the governor announced a hiring freeze.
Yeah, my understanding is that it hasn't impacted it other than adding another step of going back to OPM. So that's really all I know.
And do we have
That's
any
one of the
ETA?
reasons-
You have
I don't
our
have
good
a
wishes.
timeline yet. Yeah.
And that's why we didn't want to wait, and we wanted to kind of put out this vote to the ad hoc committee so we can start moving on working on some kind of language. And once that person is hired, then obviously that would move over to their responsibility. But I wanted a formal vote by the group on which way they'd like to go until that happens, so that we're not kind of delaying this process, and so that we also have our package kind of ready for the state by the deadline that we had marked out in that work. So I agree with you, Patrice. I think that SDE may be at capacity currently with this longer legislative season. Is there any other discussion on CPRL versus SDE, pros or cons, and what your thoughts are?
I mean,
Right,
I think
doesn't
that
look like
sounds like a good plan. Yeah.
But who, because we got to vote on the who for right now. So are we asking CPRL or are we asking SDE? And then there
Probably
would need to be a
CPRL.
motion.
That's what I think. Just knowing,
So Jen,
piggybacking
do
off
you
of
have a
Patricia.
motion?
Well, can we
I
talk
have-
for a second before the motion?
Of course.
Oh, sure.
So as a relative outsider, I just know that typically the staff doing the work know a lot of the ins and outs of what should be in place. And I question an outside entity, even one that has a very good relationship apparently with all of the partners and characters involved here. And so I don't see the harm in making the ask of SDE because I think it could greatly reduce the amount of time spent on it. I also don't know with CPRL, are we at a point where we would be expected to have to pay for something, right?
No.
And so
So we wouldn't
I
have to
don't-
pay. They're fully funded by grants. And their whole mission is assisting on organizations. They were heavily involved in the committee's work last year in generating even the legislation that moved forward to create this committee. And they were the ones who kind of did the deep dive for us for our first report on all the regs versus not. This may be a temporary solution until we get past this legislative season, and then we can kind of vote again. I just don't want to move forward individually myself on anything without the board, this ad hoc committee kind of making a decision one way or the other. And we can obviously revisit it each month or so until we get somebody in place. Because again, our admin will hopefully have that legal background where they will be doing that work. So it's really just kind of a temporary fix that we make sure that we have something in place for our deadline.
I would agree that that's the best approach, to use CPRL for the moment, in the hopes that we do have an admin on in a timely manner. They could then review the work of CPRL, but at least there'd be a starting point. They wouldn't be starting from scratch.
And my understanding is anything that CPRL or even SDE legal would kind of put together, then would have to go to policy committee of SDE policy committee before it goes to the State Board of Education anyway. So there's additional kind of like layers of making sure that the things kind of align should they not. And obviously we'd bring in SDE like we brought in today to kind of go through our recommendations and see if they see things that are going to be holes or challenges in that process as well. So I would need now a motion for one or the other.
I move that we ask CPRL to begin work on legislative language needed by this subcommittee.
Can I add an amendment to that?
Absolutely.
Legislative or regulatory language, because we have
Yes,
two that we're
both.
doing. Okay, perfect. Do I have a second on that?
I second.
Elsa, Jen, and Elsa are tying for seconds. All in favor? Go ahead and click the raise your hand button. All right, so we currently have 4. I'm going to abstain at this time as part of this, but we do have 4, so I think the motion passes under that. So then the next steps that I will do, if the board is in favor, is I will take the information from SDE, the conversation that we had here. I'll approach CPRL to maybe start looking at how we start doing this work. And if they can give me a timeline, then we'll schedule a meeting with actual language that we can start reviewing for our board. Does that be?
Thank you.
Are we all good with that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Outside of that, then we are well over, and my apologies, but I also thank you so much for staying with the conversation. I think that it was good to hear the different perspectives, and I really appreciate SDE being here. They met with me on Wednesday to kind of go over the questions that we had from this group from the last meeting. I learned a lot in that process. So I appreciate you in that process. And I think it would be a good idea for us to continue to possibly have somebody come in who can, answer some questions. And as we have like language kind of written out and we review, my expectation would be that we share it with the board as well as the folks that are here from STE, just because that way we're all prepping for the same meeting in advance of the meeting to ensure that we're ready for it. And my hope is that with a timeline, we will be able to get any kind of language to this ad hoc committee well in advance for review and discussion before this happens. We've been a little bit short on time because of the legislative season and trying to get meetings in. And I've used every planning time I have to help with that. So I just want to thank everybody for their work and the conversation around that. Are there any final statements that needs to be made before we cater a motion to adjourn?
I just wanted to ask when would be a good way, when or how would be a good way for me to talk to that other ad hoc committee about my idea about the 90-day SIR and the standard error of measure with the praxis.
I would send Kristen Basego, she's the chair of that one, a message. Thank you. I would send Kristen Basego a message on that.
Okay,
And
thanks.
either meet with you, or you could send her a document with your idea prior to the meeting with the ad hoc committee.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Because I only recently thought of it. So
No, 100%.
All right.
All
Well,
right.
thank you. This has been a pleasure.
Thank
Bye,
you so much. This
everyone.
has been really good. And I feel like
Yes.
we're moving forward on it. So I
Yes, we
appreciate it.
are.
Thank you.
Yes, we are. All
Have a
right.
good
Bye,
weekend.
everybody.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye all.
Bye, everyone. Chloe, is it still live?